this way. Yeah. Whoops, oh, you moved on me. Okay. All right, go ahead, go.
I'm Rhoda Zahler with the Jewish Historical Society of Greater New Haven, and I'm here today in the archives of the Jewish Historical Society on the campus of Southern Connecticut State University with Mitzi, Bargar, and we are involved in a project with the Jewish Women's Archive, which is based in Brookline, Massachusetts, documenting the history of women whose lives were changed by World War II. And Mitzi and I are going to be talking about her experiences during World War II and how the war changed her life. Mitzi, thank you for being part of this project. And
my pleasure.
Tell me what your first memories were that there was something going on over there that might affect your life.
The first memories are 1941, December 7th, when I was home with my parents, and we were listening to the radio, and I heard that we had been bombed at Pearl Harbor. And that was my very first memories. I knew that...
How old were you?
I was approximately 14 years old. And I remember the next day, I was in 9th grade in Troop Junior High School here in New Haven. And we were brought into a big assembly hall, and we heard President Franklin Delano Roosevelt's speech declaring war on Japan. And those were my first memories of the war. I knew that there were wars in Europe, but we didn't have the television, and we had newsreels, and you didn't get to hear or see as much as you do now.
So, how much did you know about the war in Europe before December 7th, 1941?
I was a teenager. I probably didn't pay too much attention. Heard the people were starving, heard that about the ghettos, but it didn't have anything to do with me.
Right. What role did you play in the war effort on the home front or elsewhere? Were you involved through your school, through your community, collecting things?
All right. Well, we collected fat. We collected metal that were used for future bombs. I worked as a volunteer at Yale New Haven Hospital. At that time it was called New Haven Hospital, rolling bandages, delivering mail because they had a shortage of help. I bought savings bonds. I bought savings stamps. We utilized food stamps.
How soon did that start? Do you remember? Did that start pretty quickly after Pearl Harbor Day?
Shortly afterwards, because there was a shortage of a lot of things. I remember with the meat stamps, we had a dog. My mother used to buy meat for the dog, and we ate dairy.
How did the war affect your daily life? The opportunities that you had and the choices you made during this period of your life?
Well, let's put it this way. A lot of my friends, male friends, including my future husband, were going off to war. Some people I knew had been killed in the war. Some friends of mine had lost brothers in the war. And as a result, it was a very sad time because we were a young generation that was were disappearing.
How did the war affect the way you thought about your future, your education, your work?
Well, I really didn't think about it that much at the time. I did go into nursing in the last class of the United States Cadet Corps, but the war was over. We were treated like as if we were still in service. We got a stipend. They paid for my education. They paid for my books. They paid for my uniforms. And the only thing I had to do was guarantee them that I would continue working for at least a year. But the war was over. The war you have to remember, 1945, I graduated high school. Life was beginning to become normal again.
Right. So it was really your high school years.
Yes.
It was your high school
Yes.
years. Were there people who left school to serve in the military?
For
Why don't you show us your yearbook? Why don't you show us?
Okay.
This is your.
This
Hill
is
House.
my high school, Hill House. And from Hill House, they had lost, this many boys had gone into service since Pearl Harbor.
Wow.
Okay.
Okay, there was something else in your yearbook. Your high school raised money to help the military effort.
Yes, with savings bonds, and we used to buy savings stamps, and when you had enough of them, you got a bond. And you would, at that time, this is what we, I'm sorry.
The next page.
We
That's-
donated by we, I mean my class donated this with the savings bonds
Okay.
and stamps.
Okay. So this describes your war bond activities of your class,
Class,
and
correct.
and what you helped the military
Yes.
purchase for the war effort.
Yeah.
So that there was a lot of feeling that this was something everybody had to help
Everybody
with.
was very patriotic. Everybody felt they had to do the best that they could do. There were a lot of shortages, but I don't remember, how bad it really was. But I do remember my mother once stood in line for 3 hours to get me a pair of silk stockings. We didn't have nylon. Nylon was for parachutes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Wow. How else did it affect your daily life besides having to wait in line and rationing? Were there times that you were hungry because there wasn't
No,
enough food?
I was
No?
never hungry.
You were never hungry.
I'm never hungry.
There was always enough.
Yeah, we always had. You may do. You cook things that you wouldn't normally cook.
Like
Eh,
what?
I don't remember really.
Okay.
It's a long time ago.
Long time ago. Right.
But my mother always made sure that the family ate.
Right. What were your feelings about Franklin Roosevelt?
I thought he was God until I became an adult. Because everybody else thought he was God.
Did you listen to him on the radio?
Yes, you would. You couldn't help it. He always had his fireside chats, and and with his dog Fella, and we would listen to him. And my parents, of course, voted for him, and everybody else's parents voted for him. And I didn't realize until I became much older and read more of what kind of man he really was.
What about Eleanor Roosevelt?
She was always good. She was a woman ahead of her time. I felt she could have been president, and probably was, because she was. Franklin Delano did have some handicaps, but she was a very smart, generous woman, started many things, and she was great.
Okay. How did the war change your ideas about roles of men and women? Were there women who were doing things that they hadn't done before?
We got more independence. Women were taking over jobs for men.
Like what kinds of jobs?
Well, they were working in factories. I wasn't, because I was, too young. But they were doing factory jobs.
Were these women that you knew who were doing these things?
No, because when you're 14, you're dealing with your own peers. You're
Right.
not dealing with
Right.
adults.
Right, but you were aware that women were doing
Oh,
these
yes,
things.
you read about it. You saw it.
Mhm.
There were big posters, because there was a lot of propaganda to increase women doing things and different things.
Were there things to make it easier for women to work, like more childcare?
No, I don't
Yeah.
think they considered things like that. I
Mhm.
mean, first of all, most women didn't work. They were, when the husbands went into the service, or sons that were helped support them, they had to work.
Right. What's your reaction when you hear World War II called the Good War?
I've never heard that.
Okay.
And no war is good.
Okay. What about the Greatest Generation?
Oh, of course. I'm from the greatest generation.
So, so you like that?
That sounds pretty good.
Okay. Okay.
We have very fond memories of the generation.
How did being Jewish affect your feelings about the war?
I have to tell you, I was very upset regarding the ghettos when I heard about them. I have to go back a bit. As a teen, younger than that, when I was about 11 years old, I lived in a little town that was very hard on Jews, and I had a very hard feeling because of that. And I felt more connected to the Jew.
Mm-hmm. Okay. How and when did you first become aware of what was happening to the Jews in Europe?
By the newspaper and by talk.
What were your feelings about it?
I was very upset as a teenager can be.
Right.
Which,
Right.
you know, when you're a teenager, you're more involved in your own life.
Right. Right. What impact did it have on your life?
Well, now at this stage of my life, I'm still upset what happened. I believe in the Holocaust. Terrible things happened to these people. And I wish they hadn't, but there's nothing I can do about it.
Mm-hmm.
And there's still being suffering, so it keeps going on.
Right. Right. Does it change the way you think about situations in the world today?
No, the same old, same old.
Mm-hmm.
What goes around comes around, and it seems it's going around and around and around.
Mm-hmm. You brought some other things to show us. Do you want to tell us a little bit about those things?
Okay. I brought a compact, and it might not be much to many people, but my boyfriend at the time, who later became my husband, gave this to me the day he left for service, and it's always meant a great deal to me. I wish I had some of the letters or mailings and things that transpired, but I don't. This bracelet, which you cannot see, was sent to me from England. It was during the war, or after the war, but it meant a great deal to me because it was sent. It was thought of. Okay.
By Marvin.
Yeah, my husband.
And they're English coins, it looks like?
Yep, they're English coins from, about 1942.
Okay.
Okay. I brought some pictures of me as a youngster. They're hard to see. This is what I looked like in 1945, and this is what I look like now. And I brought some other pictures, which
We can scan them.
you can scan them.
Sure.
I have to tell you a few other things that you didn't ask me about.
Okay.
While the war was going on at the Y here on House Street in New Haven, they used to have on Saturdays USO dances, and as a 16-year-old, I would go and dance with the soldiers who were stationed here at Yale. There was also a station at Yale, V-12s, and other servicemen that we would meet, and they were like, we became friends. There were, I remember on VE Day, running down to church and chapel and dancing in the streets with everybody else. There's so many memories. The saddest part is I wish that some of the people I knew that did not come back came back, and also some of the people who were wounded have returned to normal life.
Mm-hmm. tell me about the role that Yale played in the war effort and how that affected life in the city.
Yale had, you have to realize that Yale had many servicemen there from all different branches. They had the V-12s, they had the Army, they had Glenn Miller. We had lots of famous actors here who were at Yale. You'd go to the movie theater with my mother, and my mother would say, "Look, there's Broderick Crawford."
Mm-hmm.
And my famous story is that where Hill House High School stands now used to be a field hockey field. Across the street where they have the baseball players now, this is off of Sherman Avenue. They still have an empty field. And one day we were playing field hockey, and all of a sudden we heard music. It was Glenn Miller, and his drummer was on a Jeep with a board. He was playing the drum, and they were marching, and we all ran across the street to see what was going on. And believe it or not, every once in a while I still see myself in the newsreel of this particular time.
Wow.
And it really was something. It was a different time, different era. It's hard to believe that what went on.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
This first war I really was involved in. Hasn't stopped since.
Right. During that time, you made your decision to go into nursing.
Yes and no.
Yes and no?
Yes and no. But it was one of the things I decided.
Okay.
That I was going.
And you had quite a long career in nursing.
Oh yes, quite a long career. I can't even remember how many years altogether these things. Well, I started nursing when I was 21 as a registered nurse, and I retired when I was 65. I had some years off of good behavior when I had children. In those days, I didn't go back full time.
Okay. But do you think the experience of World War II and women working influenced your thoughts about having a career and working?
No.
No?
It didn't.
You think you always wanted to have a career?
No.
No?
I had no idea. I mean,
Right. You
those
didn't
things were, it wasn't like today. The pressure wasn't there.
Right. Right.
Today, the pressure is to survive and get a career.
Mm-hmm.
In those days, you either were a teacher or a nurse.
Mm-hmm.
You didn't go into the business world.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Are there any other memories you have
Oh my
about World
gosh.
War II and your family life and how it was affected,
Well,
or events that were happening?
I'm trying to, I always remember so much, and right now my mind is getting blank. But it was a real maturing for me.
Okay. Okay. Do you remember when Roosevelt died?
Oh
Franklin
yes,
Roosevelt died?
yes, and Truman became president.
Right.
Yes. I thought I would vote for Roosevelt. The way he was going, I thought by the time I got to be a voting age, I'd be able to vote for him.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Were you aware of his illness?
Yes, I had known that he had polio.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. Well, I think that we've covered everything that we need to talk about. If you think of anything else, we can do it again. And what we will do is we will scan some of the pictures and take pictures of some of the objects so that we can convey them. And I think we'll have you sign a release form to use this both for the Jewish Historical Society archives and for the Jewish Women
Fine.
archives.
Fine.
So we'll have 2 release forms for you
All
to
right.
sign. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay. Anything else you can remember
Oh, I
from that
can't.
time?
I think I did pretty good.
I think you did terrific. This is really wonderful, Mitzi. Thank you.
You're
Thank
welcome.
you. All right, we all set?
Okay.
Visiting a friend of mine whose parents owned a hotel in downtown New Haven,
The National Hotel.
the National Hotel. It's Rita Small and her mother's, who is now Rita Melman. Rita's brother and father went into the service, and as a result, Rita and her mother ran the hotel. And I would walk downtown, say an evening, and spend an evening at the hotel with Rita. It was very interesting. You met interesting people who were living there.
What kinds of people?
Oh, there were people who had no place to live and who lived at the hotel.
Single people.
Single people, yes. But Rita and her mother lived there. They had a kitchen and bedrooms. And it was the first time I had ever been, say, in a hotel visiting people.
Mm-hmm.
There were, you know, it was a different world. You were able to walk, do, see,
Mm-hmm.
without being frightened.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't go downtown now.
No. Just tell her about the blackout again.
The blackouts. Well, every night you had to pull down your blackout shades. If you didn't, the airway warden would knock on your door and tell you to pull down the shades, for the simple reason there's a lot of light up in the sky from lights in our homes, and they felt that foreign planes would see the lights and could bomb us, and so forth. So that's why we had the blackouts.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. So it didn't affect your ability to have lights on in your house. You just had to have the shades down.
Shades down, yes.
Right.
And don't forget, we all sat around the radio. We didn't have TV
Right.
or computers.
Right.
Yeah.
But your father wasn't drafted or
My father was too old.
He was too old.
My father was too old. My father worked in a factory,
Mm-hmm.
but he was much too old.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And my mother worked, but that had nothing to do with the war effort.
Right.
And but it was an interesting time.
Great. Okay. All right. Thank you.
All
Just
right.
go ahead.
In 1941, when I was 14, as I said before, I was a teenager who was basically thinking of herself. When I became 16, I met a boy who I liked a great deal, and he went off to service. And as a result, I became more involved, worrying about the war, worrying about him, being concerned about him, wasn't thinking of myself as much as I did when I was younger, because now I had somebody who was actually fighting in this war. As best I can, I will try to explain what the United States Cadet Nurses Corps was. During the war, there was a shortage of nurses. So the government started this program where young women could apply to nursing school, a 3-year school, and the government would pay for their education. Not only would they pay for their education, they would pay for their uniforms, their books, and they would receive a stipend. The only thing they didn't pay for were your shoes. You had to buy your own shoes. By uniforms, you had your student uniforms. You had a dress uniform, which you wore if you went someplace legally as the United States Cadet Corps. Seeing that I was in the class of 1945, and the war was over. The only thing I did not receive was a dress uniform. But when I went into nursing school, and I went to school in New Jersey, and if I felt that I wanted to go into the New York City to the movies, I would borrow somebody's uniform and get into the movies for nothing. In those days, servicemen if you were in a uniform, they didn't care if it was Cadet Corps, Navy, Army, Marine. All you had to do was be in a uniform. They felt you were serving our country. You got into the movies for nothing.
Were there special things that you learned as part of your nursing training that were particular to combat or battle?
Well, people before me, their last 6 months, they would go off to a military installation, some form of hospital. As I said, because I was in the last class, I didn't do that. What they did for us was ask us to take 2 specialties. I took obstetrics and medicine as my 2 specialties. And for 3 months each, I spent a great deal of time learning those specialties. The only thing I had to do, because I was in the Cadet Corps, was guarantee them that I would work at least a year or 2. But they got their money's worth. I worked a lifetime.
Thank you. Okay. All right, this was terrific. This was really